So again, I wanted to say thank you for being here, and I also wanted to say congratulations on your win last week.
Thank you.
Term. So this is starting year 2 for you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to kind of start off with a little bit of what Allison talked about. So last year, you and Representative Jones and Representative Johnson made national headlines because you took a stand. You, the three of you, along with some other protesters, protested on the legislative floor in Tennessee. Subsequent to that, as a result of that, you and Representative Jones were expelled from the legislature. So that caused a lot of scrutiny, I think, and it also brought into question the issues of race, the issues of political partisanship, and also the issues of freedom of expression. So I wanted to ask you if you could share with us how you felt being in the center of that moment. If you could talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, thank you for that question, an extremely thoughtful question. And thank you to all of you. Thank you all for sponsoring this, supporting the opportunity for me to be here in Maine. I did go to Bowdoin, which was a good choice for me, and it looks like Colby's a good choice for y'all. But I love Maine, and if I ever get rich enough, I'll have another house in Maine, because Memphis and Maine are deeply rooted into who I am. And I just got to shout out, I love elders, and one of my best friends in life was a Mainer, Richard Dick Tappan from Brunswick, and his daughter's here, Nancy Tappan, and both his kids, his daughter-in-law and son, were actually professors here and retired in 2022. So I love Colby too. And I believe that what we get in a liberal arts education is what the world desperately needs. And let's just be honest, and I know we're going to get there. It's a tough time in our country for people who believe in freedom and justice and democracy. And it's difficult when I, for the last 2.5 months, have been on the campaign trail, have been talking about what we need to do, and to suffer a defeat politically and still retain a hope in what is possible in our country. And what I pray in this time that is mine with yours, and in answering these questions that are so thoughtfully prepared, is it's a process of understanding, of healing, of growth, and of a returning to what it is that we believe. When I went to the well of the House floor of the Tennessee General Assembly on March 27, 2023, I did not anticipate that I would get expelled. I did not think about the fact that there would be a political lynching of myself and Representative Jones in front of the country and really, arguably, the world. It just wasn't something I was thinking about. You know what I was thinking about? 7,000 people came to the Capitol, mostly your age, and demanded that we do something about gun violence. And every moment that we tried to say something about gun violence, we were told, if you say something else, you'll be censured. I looked at people who came to the Capitol asking for their legislators to do something, and the people who have a job title like me looked at them and laughed at them, or didn't make eye contact at all. And there come these moments that really do propel you to do something that you might not otherwise do. Right? I did not anticipate on that day going to the well of the House floor. But when 7,000 people show up to your job asking for you to do something, and the people who are responsible for actually doing something refuse to engage them, refuse to listen to them, you are forced to have and to do something that you might not otherwise do. I went to the gallery with my fiance, Oceanae R. Gilliam, who's in law school now and who's amazing. And I told her what Justin, Representative Jones, and I had talked about, that we got to take some action. And I said, look, this is what we could do. We could go to the floor in between bills, and we could demand action on this issue. And she agreed. I went back down, talked to Justin, talked to Gloria, and we went to the well. But it was because of the external pressure that the people who were inside, who had a little bit of moral consciousness, did something out of the ordinary. And so in that moment, I did not understand sort of the gravity, right? I did not understand that we would be expelled, that the vice president would come to Tennessee, we'd be invited to the White House. None of those things were part of the calculus. And what's important for people who really want to see justice happen, who really want to see their cities and their country, their colleges be better places, is not so much that you never think about what are the ramifications of your decision. You ask yourselves, is what I'm doing right? Come what may. Because there are a whole lot of folk who want to have justice without any sacrifice. And that ultimately is the problem with the justice movement. that there are several people who want to live in a better society, who want to live in better communities, but they don't want to sacrifice for it. We ultimately, unknowingly, had to sacrifice our jobs. But was it worth it for people to realize that the 6 folks who had died in a mass shooting in our state, they can't march anymore? That my high school classmate Larry Thorne, he can't protest. My cousin TJ, he can't speak up. My mentor, Dr. Yvonne Nelson, she can't shout, demanding action. We have to realize that some moments push us to do things that are outside of the ordinary. And by doing so, even if we are doing something that is politically not advantageous, we know that it is morally right. And that's worth it, even though it's painful. And we can talk about that too. Let me fix this headset so that y'all can hear me with your good ear. But ultimately, that's what I think was going through our mind. It was what was right. And answering the call of those 7,000 people was what was right. And for you, you will find in your careers, in your lives, whether you go into politics, whether you become a CEO, whether you become a consultant, whatever it is that you want to become, that there are going to be moments of decision where you have to say, do I choose to be quiet or do I choose to be courageous? Do I choose to go with the status quo or do I choose to stand up against it? And one of those allows you to sleep much better at night. And one of those has you questioning the decisions that you've made to get you to where you are and the places to where we are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
To play off of that a little bit, I mean, as you said, the choice that you made was what you viewed as correct and courageous.
Mm-hmm.
You were then punished and said that you violated decorum. How do you think the overall system of government currently is receiving these sorts of actions? Do you think our current system is broken to say that you were punished for merely just sharing your voice, echoing the voice of the people around you?
Yeah, I think it was, it's amazing, right? You stand up advocating for people, exercising what's the First Amendment of the United States of America, right? Your freedom of speech. And the response after a mass shooting has taken the lives of 6 people, after you live in a city that I represent that has had more homicides than any other city in the state, that instead of doing something about gun violence, I become the problem. Right? The people who speak up about it become the problem. But the problem, right, of there being many firearms in our schools, in our communities, the problem of people not having to have background checks or permits, well, that gets ignored. Because you said something about the problem, you are now it. That's absurd, right? If you see something wrong, and you got the data and the statistics to prove it. Gun violence is the #1 killer of children in the United States of America. Gun violence is the #1 killer of Black African-American men between the ages of 18 and 24. We got a real epidemic on our hands. And instead of addressing it, we have people who are wanting to protect their positions because of the National Rifle Association or the Tennessee Firearms Association that don't want to do the work of actually solving a problem that is solvable. And that's something y'all got to realize. There are some problems that are solvable. Gun violence is one of those. And it isn't because you want to take somebody's gun away or anything like that. It's because there are real solutions to the epidemic of gun violence that we are experiencing. And so I believe that the actions of my colleagues were wrong. I think they were not only politically wrong, I think they were morally wrong. But there is something that happens that gets people comfortable with injustice. Right, I do remind folk, they didn't just wake up one day and say, you know what we're going to do today? We're going to expel the 2 youngest Black lawmakers in the state of Tennessee. You don't just wake up to that position. There has to be a gradual erosion of democracy. There has to be a gradual erosion of rights. There has to be a gradual erosion that allows people the comfortability to say, now is the time for us to do something that other folks are going to view as extreme. But to them, it's just another walk in the park on Tuesday. But if we don't pay attention, if we don't look at what's going on in Augusta, if we don't pay attention to what's going on in our city councils, our county commissions, our school boards, you'll just wake up one day to news that your books are being banned. You'll wake up one day to a worldview that is quite different than the one that you wanted to inhabit, because while you were not paying close attention, some people were doing things that were antithetical to the belief systems that you had. And so while I believe it was a gross overreaction, if you look at the litany of things that have been happening over the last decade, Zane, in Tennessee, this is on par for what and how people have been behaving. This is on par when you see how women are being degraded, when you see how LGBTQIA legislation, Tennessee has the highest amount of anti-LGBTQIA legislation in the country. When you see these things happening, you say, well, what other outcome were we supposed to get? And you ask yourself, I just got here, right? I just gotten elected. Mm-hmm. What were the other people doing before I got here that allowed for this to be okayed? Because I've been in this job 22 months. 22 months, that's all I've been. I got 22 months. Some people have been there 30 years. So it's what have y'all been doing while I was in diapers? To the point that now I'm elected, sitting alongside you, and I'm being mistreated this way. And you are operating the exact same way. There must be, you all must be, we must be angelic dissenters to the status quo. Y'all, the status quo operates in a way that is very malleable. It will do everything that it can to keep its power. It will change and alter and change its language in order to retain and maintain its power. Patriarchy is strong. Sexism is strong. Racism is strong. These things will continue to morph themselves into ways that speak to your own listening in order to have you adopt the mainstream status quo. But what we have to be, in all moments and all times, no matter the difficulty and challenges, is to say, what does it look like to lift up the voices of those who are being marginalized? What does it look like to lift up the voices of people who are not being spoken to? Who's missing from this conversation? And what is my role and responsibility in elevating the consciousness of the people who are around me to lift up that voice? Sure. I benefit from patriarchy, right? I do. I'm a man. I benefit from sexism. I know this. Right? I do. I benefit from those things. I don't benefit from racism, but we have to realize in all of our lives there are some places where we benefit and there are some places where we don't, which is what VP teaches and tells people all the time. But using your power in the spaces and the places where you are to say, well, let me speak from what I do know about intersectionality. Let me speak from what I do know about how being a man means I'm more likely to make more money, and so I got a responsibility to say women making 64 cents on the dollar is immoral and wrong, and so I want to bring forward legislation for pay equity. Like, you have to say, where can I use my voice? Where can I use my power to lift up the people who are being marginalized, which is antithetical to the way that things operate? Because right now, if you are privileged, you hold on to that, and you say, well, I got this, so I don't want to give it away. I don't want to share it. I don't want anyone else to have it. But instead, we have to break that mold. We have to break that way of thinking, because that way of thinking has gotten us into the place where we are, where now we have in our own state, gun manufacturers writing legislation for us. Think of this. We have corporations writing legislation about labor. This ain't who we should be, right? I ask folks, and then I'm going to stop. I ask folks, I say, who brought you this legislation? And usually you would want to hear, my auntie, my cousin, my neighbor, the guy who owns the store down the street. And they're like, well, I can't tell you that. And a lobbyist is sitting next to them saying, answer the question this way. I've seen it. You'd think I'm joking. Does everybody know what a lobbyist is? Corporation hires somebody to kind of get votes. A lobbyist answers a question during a committee meeting. Like, that's what's happening with government. And the only way that we change that is by being active participants in it.
So to continue on kind of this realm of your voice, this past week we experienced a red wave in which all federal offices were taken by the Republican Party. You, as a Democrat within a red state, without fully explaining what federalism is, can you kind of talk about what sort of actions can be taken at the state level to advance the liberal agenda, and especially what sort of actions in states that are also still red controlled?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine told me this. He said, look, there are no red states. They're just rigged states. We've got, in our country, a problem called gerrymandering. Y'all know what this is? Okay, y'all go to Colby. Y'all smart. But for the people who are watching at home, I know you sent it to your parents. They didn't go here. Look, there are people every 10 years after the census happens who gets to decide who gets to vote for them, is ultimately what it's become. And so you draw these districts and say, oh, there are a lot of Republicans here. That's good for us. That's going to be a district. You have a district that looks like it's Democratic, and if you're a Republican in your control, you break it up and you say, now 3 Republican districts. This happens the same in Democratic states, right? They say, looks like we can break that up. And so they break it up, and you get an over-representation of the party in power after the census is done. Ultimately what happens. This is unpopular, but Republican or Democrat, I think gerrymandering is bad. I think it is undemocratic in its very nature, and that I represent a district that's 60-40 Republican and Democrat, but I have a responsibility to reach out to that other 40%, not just be comfortable with the 60% of people who I assume are going to vote for me, and that having more competitive elections is actually beneficial for our democracy. The truth, and I'll be honest with y'all, because we family, we went to a similar school, y'all get it. This past election was heartbreaking for me. I mean, this is the second engagement that I've done since the election, and it's like taking a lot to like be up here, because it was tough. And I remember the last time that a white supremacist, domestic terrorist, insurrectionist was elected president of the United States, and I was in college. I was at Bowdoin, going into my senior year, and it really felt like the world was ending. And in some ways, it was. The understanding that I had about government, which you're studying, the understanding that I had about our future, a lot of things seemed to have changed and shifted. And this time around, I had, again, this high hope. And I was in a different position, right? I'm a leader within a party. I got a little bit of a platform. I traveled across the country for the past 2.5 months to what you call battleground states and things like that, talking to thousands of people, rooms filled with thousands of folks, firing people up to go to the polls under this expectation that America was going to make history, right? We're going to elect the first woman president of the United States. We're going to elect the first black woman president of the United States. That's kind of what I had in mind for our future. And it was a hope-filled future because I do live in a state, right, where women do not have the right to choose. I do live in a state where I am seeing the reduction of rights consistently for people who I care about and who I love. And it was like, wait, as a country, we're gonna like turn this thing around. And then we're at my watch party at our house, and I remember the words of one of my professors 8 years ago or whatever, and we were looking at Florida at that time, said it's too close. And do you know, I was looking at those numbers, and all I heard was Jeff Selinger in my head, it's too close. And I kicked everybody out the house, lovingly, before it was called. But I was like, it's too close. And so I know like the direction that this is going to go in. I cussed, I screamed, I yelled once everybody was gone. Everybody did their own thing. I cried on Sunday, right? Like I'm going through all the stages of grief, and I mean that for real. And even if any of you are in here, I still love you because you're a child of God. You voted for the other person. I'm just telling you what I'm going through. Going through these whole stages of like acceptance, this recognition, right? Like the whole thing. Because it's painful when what you believe about something gets challenged in this way. And particularly as a person who has a black mama, I have a black soon-to-be wife, I've got nieces in this country, and I grew up, and I'm sure some of my colleagues and folks here would understand this, being told you got to be twice as good, right? 3 times as good, just to be the same as people with white privilege and who've had access to resources that you have not had, and who will get the benefit of the doubt in ways that you won't ever get. And to see a woman who was not just twice as good or 3 times as good, but is second in line to be president of the United States already, a heartbeat away, quite literally, who was an attorney general, who was a U.S. senator, had more experience than the first black president, President Barack Obama, be told by millions of people that she wasn't enough was quite painful. Okay? That more than anything is what I am grieving, because my mama's getting a doctorate degree in education right now. She was a teenage mother. Understand this. My mom had her first son at 15 years old, my oldest brother, her second at 16, her third at 18, and me at 19. And now is getting a doctorate degree in education in this country. And she can apply for different things. And the idea that she will still be told, not enough. Right, that cuts a different way. That cuts a different way, and that is what I extrapolate as part from this election. And so what do we have to do? And I've been working on an answer to this question, not knowing that you're going to ask it, but I just finished reading a book called Harvest the Vote by Jane Klebb, who is the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party. Nebraska is my other favorite state, like Maine. How Democrats can win in rural America. Because this is something, did any of you see that map, the electoral map? There's the South, me, that's where I'm from. There's the Midwest. Do you know how many senators they get in all those states? Somebody put up how many? How many senators? 2. Every state gets the same number of senators. So if you don't compete in those states, guess how many senators you're going to get? None of them. None. And y'all know senators choose the Supreme Court of the United States. They got to do all these approval for the departments. It's like we have to re-envision what politics needs to do and who gets to engage. And for Democrats and for people who are more liberal, who live in rural states, who live in states that are more conservative, you know what you got to do? You got to show up. And we have not done the best job of showing up in communities that are rural, in communities that are in the heartland and in the South, because we've trusted, the blue wall. We've trusted the no offense to New England, right? The bicoastal elitism to somehow save us. But can I tell you about the blue wall? It's about time we build some different types of bridges and walls, because trusting 2 states or 3 states to win a presidential election isn't smart. It's not smart politically. It's just not. And if we do a better job of increasing the amount of people who are from rural areas and communities' voices, if we do a job realizing 1 out of 5 people of color live in rural communities, if we do a better job of reaching out to people in the heartland in the South and saying there's no place in our country that we want to say we're not going to compete, we're not going to reach out to, we're not going to talk to, then you build a true multi-generational, intergenerational, pluralistic democracy. But if we just say only a few states matter, you leave out millions of people, me included, right, as a Southerner. And I ain't going nowhere. My family's been in the South 250 years. We ain't going nowhere. And so as we heal from a loss, we lost a contest. We didn't lose the country. We have a responsibility to do things differently. And despite the fact that it hurts, despite the fact that some of you also are going through this process of grief, it's realizing that what we believe about our country is right. It's right to believe that women deserve a right to choose. It's right to believe that our country should invest in poor communities. It's right to believe that all people deserve a say in their government. It's right to believe, like we on the right side of this thing. And I refuse to believe that if we just accept a little bit more injustice, that'll bring some people to our side. Don't do it. Do not do it. Hold fast to what we believe, because we are on the right side of this thing. And I know it's going to be hard. And it's going to be difficult, and you might suffer some losses, and you might get expelled, right? Some stuff might happen. But when you know that you are on the right side of history, you don't turn into another direction. I'm sorry, I'm preaching.
It's all right.
Y'all can clap too.
Exactly.
In the black church, you got to talk back. You'd be like, yeah. Somebody say, yeah. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
I had to turn my mic off because I found myself going, so I turned it off. I wanted to ask another question. You've been sprinkling little nuggets. You talked about re-envisioning what politics looks like. You talked about showing up. You talked about using your voice, the voice that you have to speak for those whose voices may not be heard. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of student leaders here. There are a lot of student leaders probably watching on live stream. So what additional advice would you give to students or student leaders who feel as though their voices are not being heard? They've done everything that they have been taught to do. They're tired, I'm sure, but what would you say to the student leaders who feel as though their voices are not heard here at the college or back in their hometowns where they're organizing, or even what would you say to them?
Yeah,
what advice would you give?
Listen, Audre Lorde, the amazing scholar and leader, and philosopher that she was, said, "Rest is resistance." Yeah. I'm exhausted. I don't look like it because I got pretty hair and beautiful black skin, but black don't crack. But I'm exhausted, right? That's the truth. It's okay to be exhausted and to be like, you know what I'm finna do? I'm finna tap out. And I see y'all in 6 months. Because the truth of the matter is the work that we have to do, it's not going away. How old are you all? Yeah, 21, 19. You can take a few months. Because the work that you have to do, it's a lifetime commitment. And the reality is, for a lot of people who get engaged in social justice work and economic justice work and racial justice, gender justice, sexuality justice, they burn themselves into uselessness. And that's not in a derogatory way. It's just like they're no longer useful because they can't think the ways that they used to think. They don't read things anymore. They don't engage with people anymore. It's like you've used all of your energies up believing that the fight was one election. Y'all, if you care about this, you will be in this movement for justice rooted in love, as I call it, for a lifetime. If you care about freedom, it doesn't matter who is president of the United States or who's running the U.S. Senate. If you care about liberty, it doesn't matter whether or not you win that city council race or you don't. It's the fact that you ran for it. If you care about these things, you realize that the timeline for which you are operating is measured in decades, not in months. And it is so imperative for the future of this country that you all learn how to give yourselves rest. Because this is what I'm going to tell you. The people who are against us, they know how to take a break and have somebody else on. See, that's what we didn't realize, or we didn't learn. I haven't learned till recently. It's a few hundred of us in here, right? If I got this 100 people on, then y'all 200 should be at the beach, getting yourself together, right? And then I turn this 100 off, this 100 on. You see what I'm saying? It's like we have to have sustainability if we're going to be successful. And what happens in organizing, what happens in movement building is everybody's on all the time, which is really inefficient because we all get tired at the exact same time. And so nobody's watching the city council meeting or the school board meeting. Nobody's going up to the state capitol advocating for anything. You don't got a single person in D.C. telling the Congress folks what to do. You don't have anybody's in the governor's mansion saying, listen, these are the things that we demand. And you ain't got nobody knocking doors, talking to neighbors about what their needs are. Because we all tired. So take Audre Lorde's quote for real. Rest is resistance. And this is going to sound so strange. So I'm just 29. But like y'all so young, right? Like for real young though, that like you can really look ahead, right? In 10 years, you'll be my age. And you can be like, you know what? This next year, I'm just going to get my health together, right? I'm going to get my emotions together. I'm going to get my therapist. Y'all, let me tell y'all, because I got a therapist 4 weeks ago. Best decision I've made since asking my soon-to-be wife to marry me. Get you a therapist. Do y'all have free counseling here?
Yes.
How many of y'all have been to the counseling center? Raise your hand. Not enough hands. Not enough. Y'all supposed to be knocking down that counseling center door so much. Colby College is like, we need to hire more counselors. Definitely. Go to counseling, and not just about an election. But just to get yourself together so you build this habit from when you're out of school. I'm serious. This is me. It's my serious face. Go to counseling for real. Even if you don't think nothing's wrong. Just go and just talk about yourself. Somebody gets paid to listen to you talk about yourself. Ask your friends how many of them would rather you go to counseling. I'm just joking. But go to counseling. And take care of yourself and your well-being because we need to have people who are sustainable for the movement. And taking a break, taking a moment to breathe and to rest and relax is not resignation from the fight. It's realizing you want to be here for the long haul. When the world, when TikTok, when Facebook, when Instagram want you to think that the world is just collapsing and everything is over and everything is doomed, right? To put you into a source of apathy, really, instead of action, you have to say, no, I'm doing something intentionally so that I can better engage in the struggle. realizing that this struggle is not something that is going to end in the next 4 years or 8 years or 12 years or 20 years. That like, I'm going to be in it for the long haul because ain't nobody free till everybody's free. So if you that type of person, you have to be willing to love yourself enough to say, self, we got to chill out. We got to cut off the social media. We got to cut off the Twitter and the Instagram. We got to chill out. And instead, we got to ace these exams, right? We need to read, we need to go to our study groups, and we need to focus on this thing that we are in control of now. And keep engaging as you can. But there is no engage as necessary. Like whoever's creating that in your mind and in your soul, you got to break that. Because you are needed for the long haul. I mean, your mind, your body, your heart, your soul is needed to be in this for the long haul. But if you burn yourself out by the time you're 22 and 23 and 24, who's going to run for office? Who's going to be the state representative in this room? Who's going to be on the city council? Who's going to be the mayor of their town or their city? If you done burned yourself out, who's going to be leading their party? Who's going to be leading the NAACP? If you out, you've given it your all. No. We have to be able to realize that rest is resistance, and relying on other people to be a part of the struggle with you and a beautiful symbiosis is really important for us to be able to sustain this fight for the long haul. But realize that you are so important that you deserve to not look at CNN. You are so important that you deserve to not look at whoever's giving you all the anxiety in the world on TikTok. You are so important that you cannot look at your Instagram unless you're looking at the really cute cats, right? Like, you can do those things because you can tell your friends, you can tell your family, like, I'm in this for the long haul. And to be in it for the long haul, as my mama say, you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to make sure you're filling your cup up and that there's not a hole at the bottom. Thank you. So who's going to counseling tomorrow? Who's going to counseling tomorrow? Raise your hand with me. Thank you. All right, cool. Thank you. I'm going to hold y'all to it.
I don't know if we're about to start student questions. I just wanted to, I don't know if you would rather have like an Oprah moment with this kind of mic. I know that I have trouble with that mic, so if you want to
I know, this is so fancy.
It's up to you.
My face isn't that high tech. I can hold that one.
I mean, I did sanitize it, just so you know.
It's perfect.
So it's like,
I trust you.
yeah.
This looks cool, though, so I got some pictures with this, right?
Yeah, it's time for student questions. Does anyone have a question? Wilson.
Hi, my name is Wilson. I'm from Oklahoma, and a lot of my dad's side went to Rhodes, so
Hey!
I love Memphis.
I love that.
As I see it, the college is supposed to produce valuable future members of society.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a certain group of people, let's say 50.2% of the country, that is on the wrong side of history, isn't it the duty of the college to sort of like assert what is the right side of history?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. First, I love your family for going to Rhodes. And where's Miss McKinney? Her brother, up there. There you go. Her brother's actually at Rhodes College as an amazing professor. And so look at us, all this Rhodes College. Rhodes College is a fancy liberal arts college in Memphis. And so I love your family already and tell them I say hi. Good question. And I would think about it this way. Don't forget that some of the folks who ran for president this past time went to college. Colleges don't always produce the smartest people, right? They don't always produce the most enlightened folk. Some people go to college for what I learned in sociology of education, which was social reproduction, right? Which is the idea that people of a certain class, let's just be honest, go to certain colleges in Maine with the expectation societally that they're going to marry some folk who go to certain colleges in Maine, and then in about 20 to 25 years, they have children who go to certain colleges in Maine, right? And it just so happens that, that continues to happen for generations and generations, and again, it socially reproduces itself. Like, that's not accidental, that's intentional, because NESCAC colleges that are elite liberal arts colleges, right, there's privilege that comes with them. And so you get certain jobs that other people do not get. You get access to opportunities that other people will not get. In fact, some people don't even know that Bowdoin and Colby and Bates even exist. And that isn't because the admissions department ain't doing their job. It's that certain schools people went to, like Deerfield and Exeter and places like that, that I didn't know existed till I got to college. Because I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I was like, what is a Deerfield? People leave their kids at school all year? I was like, so where you see your mama? Family weekend. I was like, what? But there's like a social reproduction that happens in colleges and universities that you have to be cautious of, because they will do that, right? And it is not something that any individual person, any individual administrator is going to be able to change or transform. To the deeper part of your question, I believe that a college that does its job well does what I will recommend. Very few books to you all because you're so busy, but I will recommend this book / this speech is about this big, called This is Water by David Foster Wallace. Have any of you heard this speech? This is Water. I really would. I mean, for real. I heard it in college. This is the only thing I will recommend that you actually do that I said. Outside of run for office, be politically engaged, pay attention to local politics more than national politics, is listen to This is Water by David Foster Wallace. Because he says the idea of these types of colleges and universities is that they teach you how to think. Colby, I think, and knowing a couple of the people who are professors here, responsibility isn't to say that the college is going to teach you exactly what you need to say or how to say it and how not to offend and how to do all those things. No. It's to give you the skills to critically analyze the world that we're inhabiting. And if done well, your classes don't become places just where professors give knowledge. It become places of knowledge creation among peers. See, the best classes that I ever had really wasn't when the teacher was teaching real good. It was when my peers and I were arguing or debating about issues. And I started to see myself transform some of the answers that I had, and they transformed some of the answers that they had. It changed when I heard this quote from Henry David Thoreau, right? I never let my schooling get in the way of my education. See, there's a whole lot that's happening in your classroom, a lot of books you got to read and things on all that type of stuff. But what's more powerful than that is if you develop the capacity to have conversations with these folks over here who you may not know, or you meet with someone who has a different religious belief, a different sexuality, a different life experience, a different geographic growing up than you had, and you realize your commonalities and you talk about difficult and hard things. That is education. The college does a good job admitting people, right? They got smart folk. Y'all, this will never happen again where it is predestined the type of person who's coming here, right? I can tell you what your class next year going to look like by looking at your admissions booklet, right? Like it is a curated group of people who get selected to be a part of this very intentional community, which is so beautiful in so many senses and has to be expanded to be more diverse, has to be expanded to be more economically diverse, has to be expanded to be more ethnically diverse, right? That's work that the college has to do. But because this community is intentional, you are getting relatively like-minded, similar types of people together. That is an opportunity for mental, physical, spiritual growth that will not happen again. When you move into your apartment complex post-college, you don't know who next to you with their dogs at 3 a.m. running around, right? When you go to your work at a company that may have 1,000 employees, are they trying to get similar like-minded people? They're trying, but it's real hard. I helped run a 1,000-person company. It's really tough. But this done well, you being here not just to get a good degree, not just to get a 4.0, being here just, if you are here to leave as an educated person who says, I know how to navigate a world of diversity and complexity. I know how to deal with challenges and to meet people where they are, and I did that work in school. You will leave educated. School to come. But that's how, and that's what colleges like this one provide. It can't do that work for you. You got amazing administrators, but they can't do that work for you. That's going to be up to you. But is it worth it? I promise you, as a person who went to a very similar college, who in my sophomore year saw that quote, I never let the schooling get in the way of my education, it transformed the next 3 years of my life in college. And I was able, in my opinion, to leave a more educated person. And I encourage each of you, like break out of your friend group and go find some more friends who also go to counseling. Thank you for that amazing question.
Thank you so much. My name is Lami. Given the prevalence of gun violence in our society, what policies do you believe could effectively reduce this harm while respecting and upholding the constitutional rights granted by the Second Amendment?
Absolutely, great question. Yeah, I'm a big believer in all of the amendments, including the second one. I have nothing against our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, outside of the fact when the Constitution was written, my ancestors were considered 3/5 of a person. I do have a problem with that. But the 14th Amendment was supposed to address that. It didn't do a good job of it because we had a century of retribution from southern states who said that the 10th Amendment allowed them to disregard everything that the federal government was saying. The problem with people who just talk about the Second Amendment is they pretend that it's not malleable and that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights have not been malleable towards the whims of people in power. And unfortunately, I believe people who talk about the Second Amendment, who I come up against oftentimes, they actually haven't read it. They typically stop at the first half, and then they forget everything about a regulated militia. I'm just like, why y'all do that? Right? The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? In order that you might have a well-regulated militia, it's like we forget the second part because the first part helps them, right, to make a claim that we can't do anything about gun safety. And I think there are several laws and several things that have happened in states that are actually conservative or Republican-led that we could do. In Florida, you will remember after Parkland, a good friend of mine, David Hogg, survived that shooting and helped to found March for Our Lives. They passed red flag laws, or known as extreme risk protection orders, that if a person is having a mental health issue, they will not be able to keep their firearm. A law enforcement officer would be able to take it away. Do you know since those laws were passed, they've not had another mass shooting? But laws work. They work to reduce harm. You look at, in our state, you do not need a permit to carry a firearm. Do any of you know how to drive? Do you have a permit or a license? But to get a firearm, an AR-15 or a Glock or anything like that, you don't need one. It's absurd. So people are leaving their firearms in their cars, and two things are happening. People are stealing them in our city and in our state, and also you're getting a lot of accidental shootings. I had one of my constituents, 8-year-old girl, get shot and killed by her 5-year-old brother on accident because the dad left the gun on the front seat of the car. Did the dad learn anything about gun safety? Was it really pushed into his mind, like never leave your gun open, out in the open? But in our state, we passed laws that said it was okay for you to have guns inside of your car. So when you see legislation that continues to make it not only easier to access firearms, but to make it more okay for them to be in so many prominent places, you see an increase in the amount of tragedies that happen. Our country did this before. We banned assault weapons in the 90s, right, to the early 2000s. And the amount of mass shootings went down. This isn't partisan. It really isn't. I don't want a Republican to be shot. I don't want to be shot. I got security in here now and police forces because I'm trying to survive this thing, right? Like, I don't want anybody to be harmed by firearms. Nobody. And the fact that it's become politicized means that that is serving some other interest of people with way more money, power, and connections than I have. And so the only resistance to that, the only antithesis to that is what I'm telling you. It's us. It's people of goodwill and good conscience who refuse to be quiet and be silenced and to accept that as the way that things have to be forever. Because I don't want that to be your reality, and I don't want us to one day all grow up, have kids, and it be their reality that they're worried about school shootings, right? Like, we cannot turn this into normal, despite what some people politically say. And so I think there's a way to preserve the Second Amendment, right? I ain't got no problem with it, but also say we want people to be alive. And that doesn't take anyone's firearms away. That just makes sure that safety is at the forefront of the decisions that we make, which just makes sense. Thank you for your question. I'll start shortening my answer so I can get to more. Thank you for your claps, too. Go ahead. My friend in the back. Yeah, go ahead, stand up, and we'll bring the mic to you. Or we want people online to hear your amazing question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name's Doug. I'm a junior here. Now, sorry, I gotta read it over again. Sorry. Now, you've spoken previously about, people power and multiple times before, and that being the key to change. Now, today you came up here and you mentioned that there's been these constant changes in democracy that have definitely been going on behind the scenes. I guess what I'm kind of left wondering is, how do you kind of balance the immediacy of addressing these urgent issues like gun violence with the slower systemic issues that have been changing and required you to rebuild democratic institutions?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Who studies government? Raise your hand. Cool. What does democracy stand for in Greek? Anybody know? This is my new fun fact of 2024. I know, right? Ain't it crazy? You're studying government and you're this whole thing, you learn all these classes about democracy, and you don't even get the breakdown. So democracy, demos, kratos. Demos means people. Kratos, power. Democracy in Greek actually means people power. I didn't know that when I was campaigning against a multi-billion-dollar corporation talking about people power, but I learned it this year, and I'm like, yeah! It's the most democratic thing in the world to ensure that power resides with the people, with the masses, right? Even when millions and masses of people don't do what you want for them to do. I prefer that to a dictatorship or to authoritarianism where even fewer people are making those decisions. So how is it that you have faith in people power, in movement building, when democratic institutions seem to be being manipulated by Elon Musk and billionaires and things like that, right? The short-term and the long-term play. One, having the faith and the belief that what we are fighting for is right sustains me more than anything else. Because there are folks who are trying to convince us otherwise. And they spend a lot of money to do it. But I'm not going. Right? Having faith in something more powerful, having faith in an ideal, a God, a virtue, a value is extremely important. And putting your hands on something that you can change is equally important. It does no good if we're only thinking theoretically and we're not engaged in anything as it relates to the grassroots or to movement building. And so the way that you combat the need to do something short-term is you join an organization, right? The NAACP, you join the Gay Straight Alliance, you join these other things, then you say, okay, I want to help with the communications, I want to make some phone calls. You join a party, a political party, and you say, okay, here's how I'm going to be a part, right? That's more immediate. But you want to be surrounded by folks who realize, like I was saying earlier, that this is not a short-term game. That if you're in it for the long haul, the world that we are seeking to create, the world that we're seeking to build is going to require our attention and our commitment for the long haul and to bring more people into that conversation and into that work. And so the way that I have faith in our democratic institutions is because I have faith in people power, because I believe there are millions more of us who care about justice and freedom and love and democracy than those who do not. And I realize that in order for us to do that work, we have to be engaged in something with our hands on it for the immediate term as a part of a longer-term strategy, as a part of longer-term building of that pluralistic, intergenerational, multiracial, multi-socioeconomic democracy. That's the future that we're going to have to work towards and build towards, and it's difficult and it's hard, and we're going to have some bumps in the road and a lot of kinks as we continue to do it. But being a part of something for real, in a real sustainable way, in an active way, is our best way to show that people power works. Thank you for that question and for the research. You got one up here? I am going to do quicker answers. We got a few more minutes, so I'm going to shorten my answers to 60 seconds. Okay, cool. I'm cool. I can be here all night.
Thank you. My name is Max. I wanted to know what you would attribute the Democrats' loss to in this past election and what role you think rhetoric and misinformation online played.
Misinformation, disinformation is destructive to American politics. AI is creating falsehoods and things that are really harmful to our democracy, quite literally, and just the ability to have public discourse rooted in truth. And it's a difficult position to be in. I'm actually bringing forward legislation that makes it illegal to use political figures' faces for deepfake technology during political contests, because like this stuff's bad. Thank you. Again, I've been reading a lot. And now it looked like everybody who can write a New York Times op-ed is writing one about why Democrats lost. And I'm just like, but how many doors did you knock? And how many phone calls did you make? But now they know how to fix everything. And so I've stopped reading them. As I shared, I read this book, Harvest the Vote. And I'm trying to get a better understanding of what Democrats can do to help make this version of America that I know more people believe in possible. I don't know if there's a singular thing, right, that Democrats could have done differently to have won this presidential contest. What I do realize is we lost. And so we got to reevaluate how we got to where we are. And during my stages, my process of grieving, right, like I'm going to the place where I'm like, okay, what could have happened and what could have happened there? I'm not there yet, to be honest with you. The postmortem that is going to happen, that I think we'll see in Democratic DNC elections is a lot of people. A lot of new people are going to be elected who are more representative of this pluralistic Democratic Party. And I think having a leader who's smart, who understands rural communities, who understands communities that, like mine, where Democrats are in more conservative states, right, to still be in a conservative state and do what my city did. They refused to allow me to pass gun safety laws at the state level. So I worked with my city council to pass 3 referendum that changed our laws related to extreme risk protection orders, banning assault weapons, and permits to carry. And we passed those with 80% support. So that includes Democrats and Republicans in our city passed these this past election. We have to remain innovative, right, if we're going to be successful long term. And I think our innovation has been stagnated by consultants in Washington, D.C., who, again, have never done a single thing in a real political campaign. And so we're going to have to decentralize the entire political landscape if we're gonna be successful long term. You got 2 right here? Sure. Okay. They'll come back to you. Don't worry, my friend. I know you're so disappointed.
Awesome.
Go ahead,
Thanks.
stand up, tell me your name.
I'll keep it short, but my name's Joe. I'm a senior, and I'm from rural Maine, about 30 minutes from here. And I want to touch on a few different things that we talked about. Namely, I'm thinking about education and a college degree as being a big predictor, as you just talked about. The Democratic Party failed in a lot of ways, and a lot of people have different takes on that, and I've consumed more than I'd like to admit of all of those different takes. But big thing that I think about a lot is that college degree, and I'm wondering, as a leader of the young Democratic Party in this country, what your thought is and message will be to people that don't have that college degree, or to the Democratic leaders trying to appeal to that, because the Democratic Party has failed to recently appeal to those people. I went to a high school where about 25% of us went to college even, and everyone else went into the workforce, and many people did not vote the way that I voted, and I think that I still am friends with a lot of those people and have to go home and hang out with them and eat meals with them and stuff. And so I think that it's hard to understand how to appeal to those people, especially when we're in our bubble here. So I'm just wondering about what your message is on that.
Absolutely, great question. I mean, 80% of people didn't go to college. So if all your friends in college, you need more friends. Seriously, 80% of people in this country didn't go get a 4-year degree. What, less than 1% went to an elite school like this. So if the only way that you are learning and engaging is with our environment and in this environment, you've got to branch out more. I can't say it's a good thing that they voted for somebody else. I'm not going to ever say that. It is a good thing that your network of people is bigger and more expansive than just people with 4-year degrees. That's a good thing. That's all our job. The people who you meet back home, the people who you went to school with, who don't look like you, who didn't do and make the same decisions you did, that's who you should meet and talk with. Because the reality is the wedges that are being created between the parties and between people with the college education and without it, some of the smartest people I know, like my great-grandmama and them, they didn't go to nobody's college. But they instilled values and characters and lessons that helped my parents to go and me to go. We can't discount the knowledge that people ascertain outside of westernized 4-year colleges and universities. And we have to be more proximate to people who didn't have this experience. It is deeply concerning that so many people's entire network is filled with people with college degrees, master's degrees, and PhDs. Concerns me, because I'm just like, how? That's not my network. My network has all those people and everybody else, including high school dropouts. Because there's no way that you are going to be able to be a leader of a diverse community, of a diverse world, and you're leaving people out. And so it's a good thing that you have a diversity of folks to talk with, and I think it is a charge to the rest of us that, like, we have to branch out. And if you are interested in political organizing and being a part of a political party, like, you have to push that party, if that's the Democratic Party, to go be proximate in those very places, right? If you're in rural Maine, like, where do people go to hang out? Right. Parks, it's like there are particular places that folks will go that if you're in an urban area, you may not. And so, anyone here live in an urban community? Over here? Okay. It may be helpful to hang out with my rural buddy here and learn about how his life is, because it's very different. Right? Like, and just having that knowledge is significant. Anybody here work on a farm? Or family farmers? Yep, family of farmers. Anybody here not family farmers? Right? You should probably go learn what that's like, because the issues might be very similar, might be very different. But there's an opportunity for learning even here that helps you to have more, if it's not grace, more understanding about where people are the ways they are. Okay, we're gonna blitz these last ones. We're gonna blitz them. Go ahead, right here, and then right here, and then there's one there. We're just gonna do the questions, then I'm gonna give one answer. That's gonna be real short.
Hi, my name's Mason. I'm a senior from Nashville.
Woo!
Yep.
Tennessee!
Tennessee. I live a 2-minute drive from Covenant, and I wanted to thank you, along with Representative Johnson and Jones, for your response to the tragedy. Our community is still mourning and from the children and adults we lost that day, and lack of actions from leaders like Ogles and other Republican representatives. It's been hard to process. I'm wondering, what steps can we expect next, and has there been any real momentum in the state legislature when it comes to the gun issue?
I can help you with that, and we should connect, so when you're back home, you can come to the State House. Look, the movement is growing, even if the people within the legislature are refusing to move. There are more organizations, Moms Over Murder and others, who are really organizing political power and social power in order to change the conversation as it relates to gun safety, which is why we passed the referendums in Memphis, which is why we're going to pass them in Nashville, which is why we're going to pass them in Chattanooga, which is why we're going to pass them in Knoxville, because the movement is growing, and ultimately we're going to get people in positions of power who represent the voices of those who have been harmed by gun violence. And big win, we did have Shondell Brooks win her seat. She lost her son a few years ago in the Waffle House mass shooting, and she just got elected a state representative in Tennessee. So the movement for justice is still growing. Yeah, she's awesome. There was one over here. Here, you want to use the mic. There you go.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alejandra. I'm from Texas, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think about some voters, mostly Democrats, arguments about blaming the third-party voters for the past election, like for us, like for the losing of the election, and like what you think about these arguments?
Yeah. I mean, whenever you lose, you try and come up with an explanation for what happened. Instead of blaming third parties, we're going to have to do a look at ourselves and see how do we get more people to go to the polls on our behalf. I mean, we lost, and a lot of people want reasons for why that happened, and I'm sure there are thousands of them, but there's no time for blame this person, blame that person. It's time to get to work to build this multiracial coalition that we know can win. I'm doing good on my blitz, huh? Is it working?
Okay, great. Hi, my name's Dev. I'm a senior from New York City. I just wanted to ask simply, from what you can see, why aren't young people running for office?
Which one of you are going to run for office within the next 5 years? Okay, we got one. There we go. Now you got to go find 5 more to run. Look, I think there are some barriers to entry as it relates to running for office that we have to break down. The most significant is belief that you'll hear people saying, you know, you're too young to actually know what to do. You're too young to run. Wait your turn. Make your turn. Don't wait your turn. just create it. The second thing is money. To run a campaign, I think our first campaign we raised over $100,000. Raising money is difficult when your network is just 22-year-olds who just graduated from college. It's just like, I got $5, probably not 500. And so I think that's another barrier to entry that young people face and that they experience. But I would say for anyone who is interested in running for office, who's called to be in public service, find an issue that matters to you and work that thing. If it's healthcare, find the nonprofits that are doing that work and seek to expand access to healthcare. If it's dealing with people needing glasses and optometry, find people who are already doing that organizing work. You never run for a position, right? You never say, I'm going to be a congressman or I'm going to be a state representative. What you say is, I want to be of service. And when you choose to be of service, people notice. And you don't do it out of a self-interested way. You do it because you recognize there's a need to do it. And for each and every one of us in this moment in time, I will tell you, we are all needed to be of service of creating communities that are more fair, that are more equitable, that are more just. We are all needed in this moment and in this time to stand up for what we know to be right and righteousness. We are all required in this moment and this time in America's history to be on the side of justice. And this work ain't going to be easy. And we'll get frustrated and have some difficult days and some difficult moments and some difficult times. We'll suffer a few setbacks. People will call you a few names. You might lose your job. You'll get it back, though, I promise. But the reality is we need a movement for justice rooted in love. We need people of good conscience to stand up and to speak up for those who have been marginalized. We need for people to hold true to the values and to the beliefs of this country. A country built in a paradox, talking about freedom at the same time that it enslaved African Americans, talking about justice at the same time that genocide was committed against indigenous communities, right? I understand the paradox, but there's some deeper values and deeper truths to this nation that we've got to reclaim. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's an unfulfilled promise, but I am certain that if we put our God hands together, and our God feet together, and our God hearts together, and our God minds together, we'll turn that unfulfilled promise into the promise of this country. So let us not get weary in well-doing, because we will reap justice if we faint not. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you.